States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have the roll call, two members not present, Mr. Arnold and Mr. Jansky this evening. Next item would be approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do we have a motion and a second at all?
I will make a motion that we approve the agenda for this evening's meeting.
Would request that the date on it be corrected.
Yep, that was a previous version. I apologize. I thought I had updated that. Oh, yep. The website does have the correct version. The hard copies that went out had an incorrect version. I apologize for that. And I do not have any additions for the agenda this evening. Number 4, approve minutes from the April 14th, 2020 meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for the April 14th, 2020 meeting.
Item 5, approve minutes from the June 9th, 2020 meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for the June 9th, 2020 meeting.
Thank you. Then we'll move into the sole item for this evening. Variance request for 420 3rd Street North and 248 5th Avenue North. Excuse me while I find my public hearing notice here. The Waite Park Planning Commission will hold a meeting this evening, Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, to hear the following request. Request of Michelle Meyer, Jeff M. and Jill M. Waitashik, and St. Cloud Engraving, Inc. for variances from City Ordinance Section 52.42, Subdivision 7H, to reduce required parking stalls. From City Ordinance Section 52.27, Subdivision F3, to forego required landscaping buffers in a B2 Commercial General Business District, abutting a residential district, and as well as City Ordinance Section 52.42 regarding required regarding minimum parking stall dimensions and drive lane width. These requests are being made to accommodate provision of parking in the rear yard of the building for a proposed salon business, reuse of the building. The public hearing will be open. I will go through the report and then we'll take public comment or questions. I'll move into the site plan for the property, or first a general location map for anyone not familiar with the property that may be watching at home or reviewing this at a later time. You just bear with me as I get to that. This property, again, is located at, the existing business is located at 420 3rd Street North, nearby to the Waite Park Library and HR Pesties on kind of either side. And the secondary property also under the same ownership where the actual parking will be provided is on the grassy area you see at the 248 parcel here. The property was most recently utilized as St. Cloud Engraving, but has been actively marketed for, thank you, Brad, marketed for several years. The proposal calls for the footprint of the building to stay in its current configuration, while the interior would be renovated and updated into a salon and hair studio business. The proposed hair studio has a higher parking demand than the previous St. Cloud engraving business. And the existing parking on the property does not meet current standards, as it was considered grandfathered or technically referred to as legally nonconforming. The parking demand for the property, based on the square footage of the building, would be 20 stalls, and the proposed revisions would include parking for 18 vehicles, which would, of course, be 2 stalls short of that requirement. I'm going to transition into a plan for the property here. Excuse me. Well, there are several stalls existing in the front of the building along 3rd Street. The applicants have been upfront about their desire to remove parking in this area in favor of possible future outdoor seating or landscape improvements in the future, and do not want to rely on those stalls to meet their required parking demand. Staff would note that this property also does have the adjacent on-street diagonal parking on 5th Avenue, which is kind of a rarity in Waite Park and is a holdover from the previous city facilities in the area, and serves pretty much just this property and the library adjacent. I would note, even though on-street parking cannot be formally counted toward the parking requirement, realistically it would reduce the practical demand on the parking lot. Of course, with a parking lot on the street nearby, it's realistic to expect that it would serve this business. Several of the variances being requested are actually being made at the city's behest with regards to snow removal from the adjacent alley and subsequent snow storage from the plowing. This would include foregoing requirement for landscape buffering on the southern end of the parking lot, and provision of at least a 3-foot area between the alley and the parking lot to allow for snow to be cast off the alley during plowing. This was done at the direction of or request of our Public Works Director, trying to have at least a minimal area to work with snow coming off the alley without backing it up or tightening the alley, or potentially impacting people's cars and reducing the parking anyway. Landscaping, if put in that area, may be put in this area at the discretion of the owner, but the city staff noted that it is likely to be negatively impacted by plowing operations as well as road salt. So it's an at your own risk sort of situation if they choose to do that. That would be our recommendation. Typically where a commercial business abuts a residential district like this, across the alley to the south there is a residential property. Typically there's a requirement for a 15-foot buffering space, but for all practicality that's going to be impossible to meet with this property, as well as meeting the parking demand, so something has to give. In this case, because the proposed business is also a daytime business with a nominal noise or activity, as well as the headlights that you'd see in the evening or early hours, I don't believe it would be a burden on the nearby residential property to forego the landscaping in this instance. Salon is typically considered low intensity, where it has that lower activity level, so it's not as much of a concern. I do not have any concerns with foregoing the requirement for screening in this instance, and have not heard any objections thus far. The refuse enclosure is also proposed to be in front of the building, which would also limit noise from refuse collection from impacting residential adjacent residences. We do see that as an issue sometimes, where because of the early pickup for garbage, it can impact residences nearby. It's somewhat of an expectation when you live that close to businesses, but can be a little bit of a nuisance in any case, but this would at least minimize that to some degree. The last variance being requested is for minor reductions to the minimum parking stall lot depth and drive lane width. Again, this was done at the request of the city. We felt this was the best approach for this after several meetings with the applicants and their design team. to achieve that minimum 3-foot setback to allow for snow storage and deposit from the plowing, and to minimize impacts on the parking stall availability and parked vehicles. The stall depths are being requested to have a minimum size of 17 foot 4 inches instead of the minimum 17 foot 6 inches, which is extremely nominal difference, 2 inches. And the proposed two-way drive lane width is requested to allow reduction of 24 feet from the standard 26 foot width. That could get a little bit snug depending on the size of the vehicles that would be in there, but I don't think we're gonna see a lot of, commercial sized vehicles and patronizing a salon, so maybe not as big of an issue as one would think. I don't have any concerns with that due to the small parking lot and the minimal speeds which patrons would be engaged in as well. If this were a larger parking lot, I think we might wanna take a closer look at that, but this is 18 stall parking lot. They're not gonna be moving through there very quickly, so I think it's okay to reduce the sizes and do that safely and effectively. I'm supportive of the variance and believe that the applicant has demonstrated practical difficulties in adhering to the current standards of the ordinance and proposing reuse of a previous existing structure with limited availability for parking provision to realistically meet our current demand for reuse of the property with the parking. And again, portions of this request are being driven by the city's desire to ensure proper plowing operations of the adjacent alley as well. We have looked at several iterations of this, and city staff, myself, the public works director, and the city engineer feel this is probably the best all-around option for this property to reuse it and get it up and running again. In staff's opinion, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to other uses already existing and permitted in the area. And I would recommend approval of the variances as requested with the following two conditions. Number one, snow storage area and plan on the private parking lot must be identified and utilized as approved per planning and community development director. And I would note they do depict that on this plan. That's something we're trying to look for now, and particularly in smaller developments or smaller commercial projects where there's snow storage. If we have a really gangbusters years for snow again, we want to make sure that that's being handled and we know where it's going. And number two, city assumes no liability or responsibility for any damage to fencing or landscaping applicant may choose to undertake within southern parking setback adjacent to the alley. Applicant is advised that snow removal from alley and associated road salt often negatively impacts fences and plantings. Those are being my recommendations. I would recommend approval of the variance requests, multiple requests, and we can open it for comments or questions from Planning Commission and then those in attendance if you'd like. Any questions, commissioners?
Oh, it seems pretty straightforward, pretty minimal impact.
Yeah,
It's a small variation.
I agree. This is more of one of those situations where we are just trying to work with an existing property to the best of our ability. We'll probably see more of these in the future as well as things gradually turn over and change. We can open it to members of the public now if there's any questions or
Do you have any
comments.
questions, or
Oh, yeah.
please come up to the microphone?
So just to clarify here,
Can you state your name and address? sir?
my name's Daniel Demars, and I live at the house that's right across the alleyway from that property where you're putting up the parking lot. My first concern is that regardless of whatever people think is, first of all, that alleyway right now is big enough where the garbage truck can, first of all, barely get through. When the snowplow also comes through there during winter, it slops that snow across very close, tight to the road. So it's going to be very, very tight. There isn't going to be much room for anything. And the main concern that we had is we wanted to know if there was actually going to be a barrier of some kind there, because you know, we were just concerned if people were going to come through the alleyway, slip and slide, and if there's more people, if they're gonna possibly knock into the house, so. That's just our main concern. So other than that, I mean, that's our only concern. Other than that, we don't oppose anything, but we just wanted to at least find out what was going on.
Well, the request would be to forego any requirement for a fencing or landscaping. My understanding is that the applicant would still like to do that. In this instance, we're essentially kind of role reversing. Usually we require those sorts of things, but we know that just with the alley being that close and snow getting tossed onto it, it's gonna get beat up. And the idea is that we don't wanna have an eyesore of a fence that needs continual replacement, but I believe they do still wanna pursue something in there, a little bit of landscaping or buffers, but the request from the city is to forego any formal requirement for that. They could still do it on their own accord if they choose, but, just
Yeah, 'cause-
knowing that it might run into a little bit of a buzzsaw if they get a
Because
bad
there is
winter.
nothing there. I mean,
Yep.
it's just literally grass to the alleyway.
Yep, and they will have curb stops. If you'll see on this plan here, on the southern side, well, on both sides, actually, they have the kind of the bumper curbs, those concrete little beams on the ground. So that, you know, that would provide a little bit of limitation and,
Okay,
preventing
so
someone
you're,
from
what
sliding
you're saying
across.
is there won't be any fence line there, and there won't be any plantings there, but there'll be the usual stereotypical things for the parking blocks and stuff like that.
That's the minimum requirement. You could potentially see some plantings there, but the city wouldn't require it, just because, if we require it and it continually dies off because of any salt that gets
Right.
onto it, it becomes a kind of a hindrance to have to continually replace it.
Agreed.
And so if this were a restaurant or a bar or something, you know, we would move toward requiring a fence, at least something like that, but, you know, something that had more nighttime activity where there's gonna be headlights and maybe more noise and activity, but, the thought was that as a salon, it's, you know, pretty low intensity, so maybe not likely to be too much of a hindrance to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I want to point out too that the way that it's set up here with the parking lot, it might be a little deceiving, but they're not expecting traffic to just be flowing in and out of there and across that line or anything. That barrier will be there, and we're not encouraging traffic up and down that alleyway in any way from this plan. So, because they're coming in and out on the other side.
Okay.
So that's going to keep it to a minimum as well.
Yep, Mr. Blackburn is correct, and I can expound on that a little bit. There was a previous iteration of this plan. Like I mentioned, we've looked at maybe 3 or 4 different options to figure out what's the best, knowing that space is at a premium. And one of those ideas was to have the entrance off the alley, but we had recommended not going that route just because then you're driving traffic on that alley. It's not really meant to support, you know, it's really meant just for getting people in and out of their houses there.
Right.
So we didn't think that was the best play, and honestly, it came at the cost of a couple parking stalls as well. So it wasn't the ideal layout for this, but it was something that was looked at.
I got you. More practical. All right. That's all I had, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
So John, if I read this right, then the alley itself will not be impacted in any way.
I'm sorry?
If they do not put landscaping in there, the alley will not be impacted in any way.
That's correct. Regardless of if they put landscaping in or not, the alley's not gonna get any
Right.
tighter or narrower, I should say. And if anything, this gets us a little bit away from the alley. Before, one of the thoughts was to look at, you know, taking that setback and putting the cars all the way abutting the alley and just putting a fence there, which that would get you the drive lane width. You'd have the 26 instead of the 24 that they're requesting. But then you lose that little bit of space in between, and then you're pushing snow right against the fence, and that's gonna get beat up, and it's gonna look bad after a bad winter. And then the owner would have to go out there and continually patch it up, and we've done enough of those to know that they're just, if there's a way around it, you wanna stay clear of that unless absolutely necessary. Any other members of the public or anyone in attendance like to comment? Okay.
I'm Bill Mullich with Remax Commercial. I'm representing the seller on this transaction. I think it's a good use for the building, revitalizing the area as well, taking it more out of the industrial into the retail kind of, which this kind of the plan is for the city. And Jeff was forward-thinking a long time ago when that lot came available for sale. That used to be a residential lot there. He bought that because knowing the building didn't meet the parking back then. So he acquired this lot thinking that better enhances other lots. So I think everybody did a good job of thinking ahead and planning this site. So I am in favor of it.
Thank you. There being no further comments, we can go ahead and close the public hearing.
Now I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that. We should
Commission, your wishes?
vote on that, closing it.
When the two of the three of us make
Okay.
the move in second. you
Good
know,
point.
I mean, we could.
A little assumption could be made there.
I guess, unless you want to argue about it. I think Jeff's okay.
And there's no issue with moving them as one motion unless you wish to pull one of the specific variance requests out for further consideration. It's up to you.
I say we leave it all as one. And I will make a motion that we approve the application, the variance application, with the two conditions.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Appears to be none opposed. Carries. And this, we expect this will go to the city council this next coming Monday. It's a quick turnaround for us, but we know time is kind of sensitive here, so we're gonna try to get it on that agenda. That'll be at 6:30 in this room. You don't have to attend if you choose not to. You're welcome to, but it's not a requirement. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
I don't have any other business for this evening unless anyone else has anything they wish to discuss. I think we can look for a motion to close.
I would move for adjournment.
Did we get
Aye.
all in favor?
All three.
All right.
All right.
All right.
We are adjourned for this evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.